I remember the exact moment my life fractured like a dropped mirror. It was a Tuesday in October, the air sharp with the smell of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. I was 12 years old, walking home from school with my twin sister Lena, our backpacks bumping against our hips in perfect rhythm. We were identical, same storm gray eyes, same sharp cheekbones that made adults call us striking even then, same dark hair that fell in waves when we didn't braid it back. But where I was all edges and fire, Lena was soft curves and quiet light. She was the one who apologized to doors when she bumped into them. I was the one who punched walls when words failed me. We cut through the alley behind the middle school gym, a shortcut we'd taken 100 times. That's when we saw him, Kyle Rooker, a senior with a reputation for cornering freshman girls and a smirk that made my skin crawl. He had Lena pinned against the chain-link fence, one meaty hand twisted in her hair, the other yanking her backpack strap like a leash. She was crying, those silent, hiccuping sobs that meant she was too scared to scream. Her sneakers scraped the asphalt as he dragged her toward the equipment shed, the one with the rusted lock and the rumors no one wanted to believe. Something inside me snapped, not with a sound, but with a feeling, like a rubber band pulled too tight finally giving way. The world narrowed to the red haze of Kyle's knuckles and Lena's hair, the way her knees buckled, the whimper that escaped her throat. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just moved. There was a metal folding chair leaning against the dumpster, someone's forgotten prop from the pep rally. I grabbed it by the legs, swung it like I was trying to hit a home run in the bottom of the ninth. The impact was a sickening crack, like dry wood splitting under an axe. Kyle's forearm folded at an angle that made my stomach lurch even as satisfaction flooded my veins. He screamed, a high, animal sound that echoed off the brick walls. Lena screamed too, collapsing to her knees. The circle of kids who'd gathered to watch, cowards, all of them, screamed in a chaotic chorus. But they weren't looking at Kyle, clutching his shattered arm and howling on the ground. They were looking at me, at the chair still gripped in my white-knuckled hands, at the blood on my sneakers, at the way my chest heaved like I'd just run a marathon. My parents arrived 20 minutes later, summoned by a frantic call from the principal. Mom kept repeating, "She's not like this, she's not like this," as if saying it enough times could rewrite reality. Dad just stared at my knuckles, the skin split and bleeding, like he was seeing a stranger wearing his daughter's face. The school called it assault with a deadly weapon. The juvenile court called it reason enough to remand me to Willow Ridge Behavioral Center for indefinite therapeutic placement until I turned 24. 12 years. 12 years in a cage for loving my sister too much. Willow Ridge wasn't a hospital. It was a warehouse for broken things society didn't know how to fix. The building squatted on the edge of town like a concrete toad, its windows barred with chicken wire glass that turned the sky into a perpetual checkerboard. My room 217, was 8 feet by 10, painted the kind of institutional white that made you forget colors existed. The bed was a metal slab bolted to the floor, the mattress thin enough to feel every spring. The toilet flushed with a mechanical hiss that sounded like the building itself was sighing in disgust. They gave me a schedule laminated in plastic and taped to the wall, the edges already curling from humidity. 06:00, wake-up bell, a clang that rattled my teeth. 06:30, meds line, Haldol that tasted like battery acid, lithium that left a metallic film on my tongue, something else that made the world go soft around the edges. 07:00, breakfast in the cafeteria, oatmeal the color and consistency of wet cement, served with a plastic spoon that bent if you pressed too hard. 08:00, group therapy, circle of plastic chairs, Dr. Harlan with his clipboard and his, "How does that make you feel?" 12:00, lunch, mystery meat and limp green beans. The teen:00, yard time, a concrete square with a single basketball hoop missing its net, surrounded by chain link topped with razor wire. 17:00, dinner, more mystery meat. 20:00, lights out, fluorescent hum cutting to black, leaving only the red glow of the exit sign. The first week, I fought everything. I refused the meds until they held me down and forced them down my throat. I screamed until my voice gave out. I banged on the door until my fists bruised. They responded with restraints, 4-point leather cuffs that bit into my wrists and ankles, leaving purple welts that took days to fade. I learned quickly that resistance only bought me more time in the quiet room, a padded cell with a drain in the floor that smelled faintly of bleach and despair. So I learned to play the game. I smiled when the orderlies called me good girl. I nodded in group therapy when Dr. Harlan asked if I was processing my anger constructively. I folded my rage into tiny, intricate shapes, like origami cranes made of fire, and tucked it deep inside where no one could see. I counted ceiling tiles to fall asleep, 42 in my room, 318 in the common area, 1,204 in the east wing if you included the ones cracked from water damage. Numbers became my anchor. Control became my religion. But some nights, when the meds wore off and the walls pressed too close, I let myself remember Lena's face the day they took me away. The way she'd clung to my legs in the courthouse hallway, sobbing, "It should have been me, Mara, I'm the useless one." The way I'd slapped her, slapped her, the only time I'd ever raised a hand to her, and snarled, "If you say that again, I'll break out and choke you myself. Live for both of us."
She'd promised.
She always kept her promises. That promise was the only thing that kept me sane. They could drug my mind, but they couldn't drug my body. Not completely. The Haldol made me sluggish, the lithium dulled the edges, but I was 12 years old with a metabolism like a furnace and rage to burn. I started with push-ups on the cold linoleum floor of my room. 10 the first day, my arms shaking like leaves in a storm. 30 by the end of the first month. 100 by the end of the third. My shoulders broadened, my biceps carved themselves into sharp relief under the harsh fluorescent lights. The window bars became my pull-up station. I'd hook my fingers over the cold metal, haul myself up until my chin cleared the bar, lower slowly, repeat until my palms blistered and split. The orderlies noticed, of course they did. Patient Vale is hyper-focused on physical fitness, one wrote in my chart. They upped my meds, added a sedative that made my eyelids heavy by noon. I learned to cheek the pills, pressing them under my tongue until the nurse turned away, then spitting them into the toilet when I was alone. The flush carried away the chalky residue, and with it, a little more of their control. I shadow-boxed in the dark after lights out, my reflection in the tiny mirror a ghost of sweat and determination. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Each punch a promise, for Lena. For the day I get out. For the moment I make them pay. My knuckles split open on the cinderblock wall more times than I could count, but the pain was clean.
Honest. Mine.
By the end of year 2, I was lean and hard as coiled wire. The orderlies stopped trying to restrain me physically. They knew I could flip the biggest of them if I wanted to. Instead, they watched me with wary respect, like a zookeeper eyeing a lion that had learned to pick locks. I smiled at them with Lena's soft mouth and planned with my own sharp mind. Lena came on a Saturday in spring, the kind of day where the air smelled like lilacs and possibility. She was 16 now, taller, her hair longer, braided down her back like a rope of midnight. She wore a yellow sundress that made her look like sunlight personified, and she carried a Tupperware container of lemon bars wrapped in wax paper like contraband treasure. The visiting room was a beige box with scratched plexiglass partitions and phones that crackled with static. I sat on my side, palms pressed flat on the counter to hide the calluses. When they brought Lena in, my heart stuttered. She looked so alive, so untouched by the gray rot that had seeped into my bones. Her eyes, those storm-gray mirrors of mine, were softer now, edged with a sadness I didn't recognize. "Mara," she whispered into the phone, her voice cracking on my name. "I miss you so much." I pressed my palm to the glass. She mirrored the gesture without hesitation, her hand small and warm-looking against the cold barrier. For a moment, we were 12 again, Pinky swearing over stolen cookies in our shared bedroom. "I brought lemon bars," she said, holding up the container like a peace offering. "Your favorite." The guard took them, inspected, passed one through the slot. It tasted like summer and home and everything I'd lost. I chewed slowly, memorizing the tart sweet burst on my tongue. "How's Mom and Dad?" I asked, voice rough from disuse. Lena's smile faltered. "Mom cries a lot. Dad drinks. I got a job at the diner on Maple. Tips are good. I'm saving for a lawyer."
"Don't," I said sharply.
"Don't waste money on lawyers.
Save it for you.
For college. For a life. Live loud enough for both of us, Lena. Promise me." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "I promise." That promise became my new religion. Lena wrote every week without fail. The guards weren't supposed to let me keep them, contraband, they said, but I memorized every word before they confiscated the pages. I'd trace the loops of her handwriting in the air when I couldn't sleep, recreating the curves of her Y's and the dots over her eyes. Mom planted tulips in the front yard. They're red, like your favorite sweater.
Dad fixed the porch swing.
I sit there at night and pretend you're next to me, asterisk. I wrote back on the backs of meal trays with a stubby golf pencil I'd stolen from group therapy. The words were cramped, desperate. Asterisk, tell mom the tulips will bloom brighter because I'm not there to trample them. Tell dad the swing creaks less without my weight. Tell yourself you're enough. You were always enough, asterisk. The guard stopped reading my responses after a while. Maybe they got tired of the repetition. Maybe they saw the way my hands shook when I wrote Lena's name. Either way, the trays made it out, smuggled in Lena's bra or the lining of her coat. She never missed a week. Lena showed up in June with a split lip and a story about falling off her bike. The lie tasted like copper in the air between us, sharp and metallic. I stared at her mouth until she looked away, her fingers fluttering to the bruise like a moth to flame.
Who?
I asked, voice flat. It was an accident, she insisted, but her eyes darted to the guard station by the door. That night, I punched the cinderblock wall until my knuckles split and blood painted the white paint in abstract streaks. The orderlies came running, restrained me with cuffs that bit deep. I screamed until my throat was raw, until the only sound left was Lena's name echoing in my skull. They put me in the quiet room for 3 days. I counted the padding seams instead of ceiling tiles. 87 on the left wall. 92 on the right. When they let me out, I smiled sweetly and asked for extra dessert. They never saw the rage I'd folded into a paper crane and swallowed whole. Lena brought him to visiting day in the fall. Victor Hale. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a jaw that could cut glass and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He wore a navy blazer like armor and shook my hand through the slot with a grip calibrated to dominate without seeming to try. This is Victor, Lena said, her cheeks flushed pink with something that might have been happiness or fear. We're engaged. His eyes flicked over me like I was a used car he was appraising for dents. I squeezed his hand until I felt the small bones grind together. He flinched, just a flicker, but Lena didn't notice. She was too busy staring at the diamond on her finger, a cold little star that caught the fluorescent light and threw it back mocking. I wanted to break his fingers one by one. Instead, I smiled Lena's soft smile and said, "Congratulations." That night, I shadowboxed until my reflection blurred with sweat and tears.
Jab, cross, hook.
Asterisk for Lena. For the ring that looks like a shackle. For the way his eyes lingered too long on her throat, asterisk. Lena sent photos in a manila envelope, the kind lawyers use for depositions. She wore ivory lace that clung to her like a second skin, her veil a cloud of tulle. Victor wore smugness like a tailored suit. In one picture, he had his arm around her waist, fingers splayed possessively just above her hip. In another, she stared at the camera with eyes that looked bruised even through the glossy paper. I burned the photos in the yard's trash barrel during rec time, feeding them one by one into the flames. The smoke curled up black and acrid, carrying the smell of scorched lace and broken promises. An orderly asked what I was doing. I told him I was disposing of hazardous waste. He didn't ask again. Lena came in April with a baby bundled in a pink blanket.
Ivy.
4 months old, with tiny fists that opened and closed like she was trying to grasp the world. Her eyes were the same storm gray as ours, but brighter, untouched by the shadows that had started to live in Lena's. She has your scowl, Lena laughed, the sound brittle but real. I cried for the first time in 8 years, silent tears that tracked down my cheeks and dripped onto the counter between us. The guard pretended not to notice. Ivy gurgled and reached for the phone cord, her fingers brushing the plexiglass like she could feel me through it. I pressed my hand to the glass again. This time, Lena didn't mirror me. She was too busy staring at her daughter like she was memorizing every eyelash. It was 98 degrees the day Lena showed up in a turtleneck. The visiting room AC was broken, the air thick and humid as a greenhouse. Sweat beaded on her upper lip, but she didn't roll up her sleeves. Not once. I asked. She deflected with talk of work, of Ivy's first steps, of Victor's new promotion. I asked again, leaning close to the glass until my breath fogged it. She cried, silent tears that matched the ones I'd shed for Ivy. That night, I didn't sleep. I did push-ups until my arms gave out, then squats until my legs buckled. The rage was a living thing now, pacing the cage of my ribs, claws scraping at bone. Lena arrived on a Tuesday in October, 12 years to the day since they locked me away. She had a black-eye blooming purple under-cheek concealer and walked with a limp that made her favor her left side. Ivy, now 3, clung to her leg like a barnacle, her thumb plugged in her mouth, eyes wide and wary. "He didn't mean it," Lena whispered when the guard stepped away to take a call. He was stressed.
Work. The baby.
It was an accident. Ivy hid behind Lena's skirt when I leaned too close to the glass. The sight of my niece, my niece, flinching from me was a knife twisted slow in my gut. That night, I stopped cheeking the pills entirely. I flushed them all, watching the white tablets swirl down the toilet like tiny surrendering flags. The rage unfurled, no longer folded into cranes but a dragon's stretching wings that filled the room. I started planning. Lena smuggled it in a hollowed-out copy of Little Women, the irony not lost on either of us. The 1972 Triumph Bonneville Service Manual was dog-eared and oil-stained, Victor's pride and joy. I studied it like scripture under the weak glow of my bedside lamp, memorizing every diagram, every torque spec, every weakness.
Brake lines.
Fuel injection. Throttle cable. I traced the illustrations with fingers that had learned to break bones and now learned to break machines. Black ice glittered on the roads like scattered diamonds. 11:47 p.m. Lena slipped 2 over-the-counter melatonin into Victor's coffee, her hands shaking so badly she spilled half the mug. I waited in the shadows of their detached garage, dressed in Lena's dark hoodie and jeans, the 10mm wrench cold in my palm. Victor roared out on the Triumph, the engine a throaty growl that echoed down the quiet street. I'd loosened the rear brake line just enough, calculated to fail under pressure, not immediately. The crash was surgical, a skid on the ice, a desperate grab for the brake, the guardrail catching the bike at just the right angle. A controlled tumble. No fatalities. Just enough to put him in traction for 6 weeks. The police report read driver error, possible mechanical fatigue. Lena's tears at the hospital were real, she'd practiced them in the mirror for days. Victor was in the ICU at St. Augustine Medical Center, a private room on the 3rd floor with a window overlooking the parking lot. Lena visited daily in her modest cardigans and practiced tears, playing the devoted wife to perfection. I visited once, as her. The nurses barely glanced at the ID. Identical twins were a paperwork nightmare, and budget cuts meant no one had time to care. I memorized everything. Shift changes at 7 a.m., 3 p.m., 11 p.m. Morphine drip at 2 milligrams every 4 hours. The way the night nurse, Carla, always took her break at 2:15 with a vending machine coffee. The security camera blind spot in the east stairwell. On night 7, Lena signed the discharge papers for Mara Vale, miraculous stabilization after acute episode. The real Mara, me, was quietly marked as transferred to a long-term care wing that existed only in forged paperwork. Willow Ridge, understaffed and overwhelmed, never noticed I was gone. Lena took my place in room 217, sedated just enough to pass for catatonic during rounds. The staff assumed the new patient was simply deteriorating. No one cross-checks twins when the system is broken. I walked out in Lena's coat, her wedding ring cutting into my finger like a brand. The night air tasted like freedom and war. Pinecrest Lane was a street of sagging Victorians and overgrown lawns, the kind of place where dreams went to die. The Hale house squatted at the end like a sullen toad, its sage paint peeling in curls that revealed rotten wood beneath. The front porch sagged under the weight of too many years and too little care, the steps creaking ominously as I climbed them with Lena's keys jangling in my hand. Inside smelled of mildew and lemon disinfectant fighting a losing battle, the air thick with the ghosts of meals uneaten and words unspoken. Evelyn Hale, Victor's mother, sat in a floral armchair that had once been grand but was now threadbare at the arms, her posture rigid as a queen on a crumbling throne. She was 65 but looked 80, her face a map of disapproval etched deep. Grant, Victor's younger brother, lounged on the couch with his feet on the coffee table, a beer sweating in one hand, his eyes glued to a football game on the ancient TV. Ivy played in the corner with a one-eyed doll, her dark hair tangled, her dress too small and stained with what might have been ketchup or blood. Evelyn sniffed as I closed the door behind me. "You're late. Dinner's cold." Again. I smiled Lena's timid smile, the one she'd perfected over years of appeasement, and set my purse on the side table. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. The hospital traffic was terrible." Grant didn't look up. "Vic's gonna be pissed you didn't bring him anything. Man's laid up and you can't even manage takeout." Ivy glanced up at the sound of her father's name, then quickly looked away, hugging her doll tighter. My heart twisted, but I kept Lena's face soft. Inside, I catalogued every detail. The way Evelyn's lips thinned at the mention of her son, the way Grant's knuckles whitened around his beer can, the way Ivy's shoulders hunched like she was bracing for a blow that hadn't come yet. This was the battlefield. I was ready. After a planned accident, I switched places with my abused twin sister and made her husband beg for mercy. Asterisk, continued, full 25,000 plus word Reddit style revenge epic. Seamless, flowing prose. No shortcuts. No bullet points. Every day a slow knife.
Asterisk.
The kitchen was a war zone of chipped formica and grime that had settled into the corners like a permanent fog. The refrigerator hummed with a death rattle, its door sealed with duct tape where the gasket had given up years ago. I stood at the stove in Lena's faded floral apron, stirring a pot of beef stew that I'd deliberately oversalted until it tasted like the tears I'd swallowed for 12 years. The carrots floated like drowned corpses, the potatoes had dissolved into mush, and the meat, tough chuck I'd bought on clearance, was chewy enough to make molars ache. Evelyn shuffled in first, her orthopedic slippers scuffing the linoleum. She wore the same floral housecoat she'd had on yesterday, the fabric pilled and yellowed at the collar. Her eyes narrowed at the pot. That smells like the bottom of the ocean. Did you even rinse the meat? I kept Lena's voice soft, apologetic. I followed the recipe on the package, Evelyn. I'm sorry if it's not to your taste. Grant lumbered in next, shirtless despite the chill, his belly hanging over the waistband of his sweatpants. He grabbed a spoon and shoveled a mouthful straight from the pot, ignoring the bowls I'd set out. His face contorted. Jesus Christ, Lena. You trying to poison us? Ivy trailed behind him, clutching her doll by one arm. She hovered at the threshold, eyes wide, until Grant barked, "Sit down and eat, kid. Don't make me say it twice." She scrambled to her booster seat, her legs dangling, and picked at the burnt toast I'd served on the side. When Grant flicked a carrot at her head, she flinched so hard the doll fell to the floor. I bent to pick it up, my fingers brushing Ivy's knee under the table. She froze, then relaxed a fraction when I didn't grab or yell. I set the doll in her lap and whispered, "It's okay, baby. Mama's here." The word mama felt foreign in my mouth, but it fit.
It had always fit.
Evelyn chewed noisily, her dentures clicking. Inedible. You've been useless since Victor's accident. Can't cook, can't clean, can't even keep the child quiet. I smiled Lena's smile, the one that said I'm sorry, I'll try harder. Inside, I was carving their names into the walls of my mind with a rusty nail. Asterisk Evelyn.
Grant.
Victor, asterisk 3 heads on 3 pikes. After dinner, I washed dishes in water so hot it scalded my hands.
The pain was grounding. Real.
I hummed under my breath, an old lullaby Mom used to sing when we had nightmares. Ivy crept in, drawn by the sound, and watched from the doorway. I dried my hands on a dish towel that smelled of sour milk and beckoned her closer. "Want to help?"
I asked.
She nodded, solemn. I gave her a plastic cup to dry, showed her how to circle the towel inside. Her tongue poked out in concentration. When Evelyn's voice cracked like a whip from the living room, "Ivy."
Bed.
The child jumped, the cup clattering to the floor. I caught it before it shattered. "It's okay," I murmured, kneeling to her level.
Go on.
"I'll finish." She hesitated, then pressed a sticky kiss to my cheek before scampering off. The spot burned like a brand. That night, I lay in the narrow twin bed that had once been Lena's, the mattress sagging in the middle like a defeated animal. Victor's side was cold and empty, the sheets still smelling faintly of his cologne, something sharp and expensive that made my stomach turn. I stared at the ceiling crack that ran from the light fixture to the corner like a lightning bolt and planned. The basement was a dungeon of damp concrete and exposed pipes that dripped like slow torture. The washer rattled like it was trying to escape, the dryer belched heat that smelled of lint and despair. I carried down a basket of Victor's clothes, silk shirts, cashmere sweaters, the monogrammed boxers he insisted on because real men don't wear cheap cotton. Grant followed me down under the pretense of grabbing a beer from the ancient mini-fridge. His breath was sour with energy drinks and the kind of entitlement that came from never being told no. He leaned against the dryer, blocking my path. "You're jumpy since Vic's crash," he said, his voice low and oily. "All that time in the hospital making you lonely? Need a real man to remind you what you're missing." His hand grazed my hip, fingers curling like they had a right to be there. I let him think I was Lena, soft and scared and broken. Then I moved, fast, precise, the way I'd practiced on shadows for 12 years. My hand snapped up, caught his wrist, twisted until the joint popped like a knuckle cracking. He yelped, tried to pull away, but I held firm, my thumb digging into the pressure point just below his thumb. "Oops," I whispered, Lena's voice sweet as poisoned honey. Clumsy me. Must be the detergent fumes. I released him and stepped back, basket balanced on my hip. He cradled his wrist, face flushed with pain and humiliation. You crazy.
Language, I said mildly.
Ivy might hear. He stormed upstairs, muttering curses. I waited until his footsteps faded, then opened the washer and dumped in an extra cup of bleach. Victor's white shirts would come out tie-dyed in despair. I found them under Ivy's mattress while changing her sheets, crumpled sheets of construction paper, the kind teachers hand out for art class. Stick figures in red crayon, a big one with spiky hair and fists, a small one with a round head and tears, another small one hiding behind. The word Daddy scrawled in shaky capital letters across the bottom, the Y backward. My hands shook as I smoothed them out. The paper was soft from being handled, edges frayed. I folded them carefully and tucked them into an envelope addressed to Victor in Lena's looping handwriting. Asterisk get well soon, darling. Ivy made these for you. Asterisk I added a sprig of dried lavender from the windowsill, Lena's touch, not mine. When I mailed it from the corner pharmacy, the clerk didn't look twice. Just another wife sending love to her injured husband. The medical bills arrived like clockwork, thick envelopes with Victor's name in bold print. $87,000 and climbing, traction, surgery, physical therapy, the private room he demanded because Hales don't do wards. Insurance was balking at the motorcycle's aftermarket modifications, the ones Victor had bragged about on social media like a peacock flashing feathers. I volunteered to manage the finances. Lena's good with numbers, I said, echoing something Victor had once mocked. They agreed without question, Evelyn because she hated paperwork, Grant because he hated effort. I intercepted every letter. Forged a new one on hospital letterhead I'd printed at the library, asterisk coverage denied, suspected tampering with vehicle safety systems. Policy void, asterisk I planted it in Grant's gym bag, buried under sweaty socks and protein bar wrappers. He found it during dinner. His roar shook the walls. You little shit. You messed with Vic's bike. Evelyn's face went purple. She grabbed a rolled-up magazine, asterisk good housekeeping asterisk, ironically, and beat him across the head and shoulders until his ear bled. Grant curled into a ball, whimpering. Ivy watched from the hallway, eyes huge, doll clutched to her chest. I comforted Evelyn with tea and sympathy, my hand steady on her shoulder as she ranted about ungrateful sons and family ruin. Inside, the dragon stretched its wings. Victor came home in a wheelchair, his legs in casts, his pride in tatters. The house smelled of antiseptic and defeat. I swapped his pain pills with laxatives, over the counter, untraceable, slow release. Nights, he woke screaming, clutching his stomach, soiling himself like a toddler. I changed the sheets with gentle hands, cooing, accidents happen, darling. The doctor said it's normal after trauma. He wept into my shoulder, snot and tears soaking Lena's nightgown. I'm sorry, Lena. I'll be better. I swear. I stroked his hair and whispered, I know you will. Victor tried to reassert control from his wheelchair, grabbing my wrist when I brought his tray. His grip was weak but desperate, fingers digging into the bruises Lena had taught herself to hide. You've changed, he hissed. Softer. Meaner. What the hell happened to you? I leaned close enough to smell the fear sweat on his skin. Maybe I'm just done pretending. I pried his fingers off one by one, bending them back until he whimpered. Then I kissed his forehead like a mother soothing a child and wheeled him to the basement mun cave for his physical therapy session. The weight bench gleamed under the single bulb, resistance bands coiled like snakes. I waited until 2:17 a.m., Carla's break time, the house asleep. I wheeled Victor down the ramp I'd installed for his convenience, his protests muffled by the gag-eyed fashion from his monogram tie. In the basement, I tied him to the weight bench with the resistance bands, looping them tight around his wrists and ankles. He thrashed, eyes wild, but the casts made him helpless. Upstairs, I triggered the security alarm, then disabled it with the code I'd watched Evelyn punch in a dozen times. Sirens wailed for exactly 30 seconds before cutting off. Evelyn and Grant stumbled down in bathrobes and confusion, hair wild, faces slack with sleep. I met them on the landing, tears streaming down my cheeks in perfect Lena fashion. Victor, he's hurt.
He fell trying to exercise.
I can't lift him. They rushed past me, feet thundering on the stairs. I slammed the basement door behind them and locked it with the deadbolt Victor had installed for privacy. Through the wood, I heard Evelyn's shriek, Grant's curse, Victor's muffled pleas. I called 911 with shaking hands, Lena's hands. Please, there's a domestic dispute at 1427 Pinecrest Lane. They're hurting my husband. Send help. The police arrived in under 8 minutes. They found Victor bound and bruised, hysterical, babbling about brake lines and sabotage. Evelyn and Grant stood over him, covered in his blood from trying to free him, their faces twisted in rage and confusion. I stood in the corner, arms wrapped around Ivy, showing the officers everything. The drawings, now laminated in a plastic folder for evidence. The medical bills, highlighted in yellow. The forged insurance letter, crumpled in Grant's fist. The faint fingerprints on my throat, Victor's, from week 4. The officers looked at me with something like pity. At them with disgust. Cuffs clicked on Evelyn's wrists first. She spat curses until they gagged her with her own scarf. Grant went quietly, head down, muttering about that crazy bitch. Victor was loaded onto a stretcher for psych evaluation, his eyes locked on mine as they wheeled him out.
Take it all, he whispered.
Just leave me breathing. I smiled Lena's smile and closed the door behind them. We sold the Victorian to a developer who planned to gut it for condos. During the walkthrough, the realtor found Evelyn's safe behind a false panel in the master closet, $1.2 million in cash and bearer bonds, hidden from taxes and ex-wives. After lawyer fees and administrative costs, it came to $800,000. Victor signed the divorce papers from his hospital bed, his hand shaking so badly the pen left ink blots like blood. The settlement was generous. The house, the savings, full custody of Ivy. He kept his life and nothing else. The farmhouse sits on 20 acres of rolling hills, blue shutters faded to the color of Lena's eyes after crying. There's a tire swing hung from the old oak, a garden where Lena grows tomatoes that taste like sunshine, a porch where I teach self-defense to women who've forgotten their own strength. Ivy calls us both Mama, Mama Mara when she wants stories about dragons, Mama Lena when she needs band-aids and lullabies. Some nights, the rage still coils in my chest like a sleeping serpent, but now it guards the door instead of burning the house down. Lena gardens in the mornings, her hands in the dirt, her laughter light as birdsong. I run at dawn, miles of country road under my feet, the wind carrying away the last echoes of Willow Ridge. We kept one thing from the old house, the lightning bolt crack in the bedroom ceiling. I traced it with my finger the night we moved in and whispered to the dark, "We are not the storm anymore." The sunrise after 12 years of darkness is blinding.
We are the light.